what is reading? This can't just be taken for granted, but a very simple definition is provided by William Grabe. Reading can simply be defined as a complex ability to extract or build meaning from a text. So again, this definition of reading is about meaning. And this is, basically what Grabe says, right? That we want to get the meaning out of the text, extract it, right? Or build meaning from that text. Okay. So we're going to come back to this definition when we talk about exegesis in a bit. But it's important to understand at the outset, what are we talking about when we talk about reading, right? We're not talking about merely uttering the sounds of a language. It has to be connected to the meaning that the sounds represent. So there are a lot of steps in reading, and this is a very simplified list of the steps involved in reading. But this is just some of what's going on. So visual perception. So when you read, you have to focus your eyes on something. So there has to be this perception of different letters and basically how those letters are connected. Orthographic identification. So this is actually identifying the letters. We will see an example of this in a second, but it's not enough to have a certain visual stimulus, right? You have to actually identify the letters and know, okay, this is the letter M or whatever. And so in some languages, this is easier than others. Obviously, it's trivial in English, right, for us native English speakers, but it's not so trivial in other languages. And then we have a phonological representation. So once your eye senses we'll call it a grapheme, right? A symbol that represents a sound, then we have to know what that sound is, right? So if I look at the letter R, right, I have to know that that symbol represents a certain phonological representation for the speaker of that language, okay? And then I have to have some sort of lexical retrieval. I have to string that phonological representation together for all the sounds in that word. And then I have to pair that sound in my head to some sort of word with meaning. That word with meaning has a certain morphosyntactic features, right? So for example, certain words are nouns, certain words are verbs, adjectives, etc., etc. So all of this is information about the word, and that information also needs to be interpreted quickly in context. Okay. And then we have prosodic knowledge. So this is how we read a text, a like fuller text, let's say a whole sentence at least, particularly the intonation involved. And we will get into examples of this as well. But prosody is a very important part of understanding the meaning of a text. And unfortunately, or fortunately, it's not often conveyed in the orthography. Okay, so the prosody, how you're supposed to read it, particularly for Greek, let's say, there's nothing in the Greek text that tells you to have this sort of intonation, even, a rising intonation with a question. There's nothing that tells you that in the orthography itself. Okay, so we have to know as we're reading that this is a question from the context. And then there's connected text knowledge. So I'm connecting constantly what I'm currently reading to what I've just read, and I'm interpreting what I'm currently reading in light of what I've just read. And I'm also comprehending at a global scale, what is the author trying to do with this text? Okay, so those are some of the steps in reading. So now I want to just take an example of this. Reading Marathi. Okay, this is a language in India, I believe. And I just took this as a language that hopefully most people don't know. And we'll use it as an illustration to figure out what needs to happen for us to learn how to read this sentence, okay, in this foreign language, this language that is probably not your own. So first, what you have to do, like I said, is you have to have this visual perception, okay? You have to actually see the letters. And again, for native English speakers especially, this isn't too hard because our letters are all disconnected. It's pretty easy to distinguish one from the other. This is not so easy in a language like Marathi, where the letters are connected together, and it's hard to parse out the different letters. And so that's the second step. It's orthographic identification. So we have to figure out, okay, what letter is being represented by this curve or this box? So I don't know this language. So I don't know how to do that here, but that's what you would have to do in order to learn how to read this sentence. And then what you would have to do is you'd have to figure out what each of those letters stands for in terms of the sounds of that language. And then after you know the sounds, you have to have an idea of what that string of sounds means. The actual, so this is the lexical retrieval stage. You have to figure out the meaning of me. This first symbol here, I got the transliteration just below it. Me, I don't know what that means in this language. So I have to figure out, if I want to learn how to read this language, Marathi, I have to figure out what me means. And then I also have morphosyntactic knowledge. I want to have a certain level of knowledge of, okay, if me means I don't know. I don't know if this is actually, the Marathi is, I am eating fish is me mase kata ahi ahe. I don't know if that's word for word there, but I would have to figure that out, right? I would have to figure out some sort of extra meaning or the morphosyntax, basically, of this word me in order to read it and understand it in context. Okay. So those are all the things I have to do just to get to the point where I can gloss this in English, right? That kind of reading is often what happens with Greek and Hebrew, right? This word equals this word equals this, and I just kind of translate back and forth. Okay. So this is, if we were to learn Marathi, this would be the first step. And it is the first step, right? I have to go through these 5 things and I have to basically become skilled at each of these things. Okay. Now, there's other things in order to really comprehend what's going on with this sentence that I would want to know. For example, prosodic knowledge, right? So I am eating fish is probably, well, almost certainly in the context of a text, the answer to at least an implicit question, right? So let's say the implicit or even explicit question in the text is, who is eating fish? I might say to that, I am eating fish, versus the implicit question of the text being, are you eating a fruit? I would say, I'm eating fish. So you can see I'm eating fish versus I'm eating fish. That's prosodic knowledge. So in one case, I'm stressing I, and in the next case, I'm stressing fish at the end. And those 2 sentences mean different things. Okay. They don't mean the same thing. And the sentence just I'm eating fish doesn't tell us how to interpret whether it be I'm eating fish or I'm eating fish, that sentence. So what we have to do is we have to connect this sentence, I'm eating fish, with the rest of the text, right? And this is where the connected text knowledge comes in, to ask, okay, what question, either explicitly or implicitly, is being asked in this text, right? And then that will inform how we read the sentence. So prosody is a key metric that's used to help us see whether someone is actually understanding the text that they're reading. And finally, there's comprehension. So, for example, I might be using this sentence as a reason for saying that I don't need anything else to eat. No, I'm eating fish, right? And so, this sort of higher level comprehension of the text where I'm eating fish, again, there's nothing about that sentence that would mark it as a reason. But if I connect that sentence in the context of what I'm reading at a global scale in the text, then it might be the case that I'm eating fish is a reason for something, right? A reason that I don't need any other food. Okay. Those are all things we need to know when we're reading. So that's deep reading, right? Just to go back to this really quick. What we want at the end of the day, right, is this last step of comprehension. We want to be able to comprehend the biblical text like the authors intended it. Okay. So in order to get there, we have to go through all of these stages. Okay. And we have to get good at them.